Welcome back to DCC Sodor for another review, this time on an icon of American steam, the New York Central J3a Hudson.
Oh, that's cool. My precious!
This specific one is the brand new model released by Bachmann, with a chunky die-cast chassis and boiler and a TCS WOWSound decoder. This is an enticing model with an MSRP of $479. Average price around $300 for your brick and mortar or online hobby shop. These locomotives will give any competitor a run for its money. So does this model hold up to the competitors of Broadway Limited? Let's find out. The Bachmann J3a was initially announced in N scale back in 2020. Then, 2 years later, the HO scale model was announced, or at least that's what I could find. The model finally shipped around August of 2023, and it became a big hit quickly. So why all the hype? Well, the DCC Sound die-cast steam locomotive can be had for the same price as a nice Rapido or Scale Train's DCC Sound diesel locomotive. Most of the time that is not the case. So it's nice to see that here. This shows the importance of inexpensive but still quality steam locomotives in our hobby. But a few compromises for detail still are okay just for the sake of value. This model has a good variety of separately applied and molded in detail. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the J3a and their place in New York Central history. The J3as were the last batch of Hudsons delivered to the New York Central between 1937 and 1938. They were nicknamed Super Hudsons. 50 of these locomotives were delivered, 10 of which were delivered with streamlining designed by Henry Dreyfuss. Bachmann has also just announced those models too. The Hudsons were used in high-speed passenger service and came to fame from named trains like the Empire State Express and 20th Century Limited. Their downfall, however, came from low-speed traction. They required a booster truck under the cab, but once up to speed, they were able to produce more power. These booster trucks were deemed troublesome and led to the development of the 482 Mohawks, mostly called Mountain on other railroads, which replaced the booster with an extra drive wheel. Retirement of all the Hudsons began in 1953, and by 1957, all had been scrapped and the only remaining tender had been converted to a steam generator. This is now at Steamtown in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So that's a little bit of history about the J3a. Now let's take a look at Bachmann's rendition. First, the boiler along the engineer's side. We've got separate handrails and molded in throttle linkage and other piping. The molding is very crisp and almost makes the detail look separately fitted, which is tough. So props to Bachmann for that. The other side has similar details and separate piping on the smoke box. The smoke box is finished in an incredible graphite. Looks absolutely incredible, and it contrasts the black boiler jacketing very well. Under the walkways on both sides, we've got great levels of piping details, and I think one of the best parts of this model is the running gear. All of the rods and drive wheels look great. The rods aren't too thick, nor do they look light. They've got some weight to it, which is usually hard to get on an HO scale model, and I think they did a really good job of that. I'm really impressed with how Bachmann was able to achieve this look and make it look real. The cab has a lot of molted in detail as well, and the tender does too. Underneath the tender, the detail is minimal, but it does have that most important NYC detail of the water scoop. The back of the tender also has a decent mix of separate and molded in details. That's a quick overview. So before we get on to running, let's take a look under the hood and see what the chassis and decoder look like. Underneath the boiler, there's another chunky die-cast frame with a standard Bachmann can motor connected to the rear wheels. Then there's an 8-wire plug from the locomotive to the tender, and in the tender we have the decoder, speaker, and keep alive. While the high bass speaker is pretty good, I've noticed that there can be some tender shell rattle. So maybe turn the master volume down a little bit on your model. I'll be doing that myself. The other issue was that the decoder was all crooked and pushed down against the circuit board underneath of it. And I suspect that actually caused some issues, which I'll come back to later. So let's get the Hudson running. As at this point, it's had plenty of break-in time on my layout, so it should already be ready to go. And it navigates the layout fine with all of my undulations and sharp corners. It's fine. It hasn't had any issues at all. However, the decoder, when I first got it, did have a few issues, like right here. Whoa. Yeah, so that wasn't so good. But this doesn't happen very often. And really, after I reset the way that the decoder was sitting on your 21-pin plug, I haven't had any issues at all. The decoder butt does seem to get quite hot, and the tender gets kind of warm, so I wouldn't let it sit for long periods of time. Keep the engine moving so that there's airflow coming through the tender. So now it's time to see how well it pulls. If we look at this clip here, we can see it's moving all 8 coaches that I have it pulling, but it is struggling a little bit. Those Broadway Limited Southern Pacific Daylight coaches are not the freest rolling, which could contribute to that, but still for a die-cast locomotive, I'd have expected a little less traction problems. So, in my opinion, I think that's about everything I'm looking for in a locomotive. So, let's move on to some of the scoring I've given it. And scoring, I'll go over a few of the other things that maybe I haven't talked about too much, such as packaging. So, we'll take a look at the packaging. It's Bachmann has redone their packaging. It looks a little bit different than it has in the past for steam locomotives. I like the new color scheme on it, and I think it's really good for storage, but I do think that they should have shortened it up a little bit. I assume that in the future they're planning on releasing like some kind of EM1 again. They've released those in the past, so they're probably making a package so that they don't have to release multiple or create multiple types of packaging. So I give the packaging an 8 out of 10. Detail, I'm going to give it a 9. While most of it is finely molded and even some of the separately applied, there is still some of the detail, like some of the pipe work that's closer to the cab. It's a little chunkier than I would have preferred it to be. So the power, I'm going to give a 7. I was just a little disappointed considering how heavy this locomotive is. I mean, it's not like big boy heavy, like a Broadway Limited big boy heavy, but it's still not a light locomotive. I don't have a scale to weigh it, unfortunately, but I'm going to give it a 7 in that regard. DCC, 10 out of 10. TCS WOWSound decoders have incredible sound and are perfect for any steam locomotive. So 10 out of 10 for that one. Running quality, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. While it's a smooth runner, the decoder, did kind of freeze a little bit, which I wouldn't say is a DCC capability problem, but more of which is why I kept the 10 out of 10 for DCC, more of a running problem, so I've given the running quality an 8 out of 10. NMRA compliance, I've given it a 9.5. The couplers were at the correct height. The only thing I found was that the very front pilot wheel, it was out of gauge just slightly, which is why I took half a point for that one. Quality, 8 out of 10. Again, with the decoder issues I've had to start off with, I've given it an 8, but if not, it probably would be closer to a 9. Value, man, I have to give this a 10, actually. I really think that, for less than $300, you get a highly detailed DCC and sound equipped locomotive. I mean, a TCS keep alive and speaker, high bass speaker, would probably have cost you almost $130. So if you think about it, this is a really good deal for a model. So that brings us to a total score of 69.5 out of 80, which is a solid middle B on a standard report card. A good score for this model. While not perfect, it certainly delivers where it was trying to deliver. And with that, it's time to end. Make sure to check out Factory Direct Hobbies. If you use my link in the description to browse their site, you'll be helping me out if you purchase within 30 days of clicking their link. And if they still have any Hudsons in stock, I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought on the Bachmann Hudson. And I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.